Hi. Hi, everybody. It is The Gathering. I'm Brittany.
I'm Corlisha.
And I am Janelle, and we are wanting to have a conversation with you. A very serious conversation, one that is necessary to talk about. And today we're just going to converse about suicide and what's that looking like in our community, what it's looking like in our nation, what it's looking like in our children, unfortunately. So let's get the conversation started, ladies.
We want to, first of all, acknowledge the fact that this is a conversation that needs to be had, but it's often not tapped. And so we want to just be open and honest and transparent with you. And please, before we really get into it, just be on the lookout for some resources in our description box and below. So if at any point you feel moved or triggered in any way, you can reference those, because this is not an easy topic, but it is an important topic because of the prevalence. Suicide is very much around us. Many of us have been touched by suicide in some way, very personally. And it's important that we start having even tough conversations, because it's real. It's real. Suicide hits lots of communities and no one is exempt. I know that people have that thought idea, but it is certainly a myth that certain communities are just not touched by suicide, that certain communities and populations, certain races don't attempt suicide, but that is just not true. So age is no longer a factor. Race is no longer a factor. Religion is no longer a factor. There are people attempt suicide at different points of their lives, but there's nobody that's exempt from the drama and the trauma of suicide, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I think that when it comes to prevalence, like you said, there is no particular group or category that at this point we can focus on saying it's happening too much or it's not happening at all. I know one of the things that I never considered when I was a young adult, that children under the age of 10 are committing suicide. They are now exposed to so much technology. They are exposed to things that would have them think up plans that, maybe when we all were young, we would have never had an idea about. And now they have so many resources that they can look up what it means when they're feeling sad. They can look up what to do if they don't want to live anymore. And so it's happening in every stage and in every age of life. And I think it's important to remember this as a community and as parents, because I think even parents, realize my child might get sad, but my child will never think of taking their life. It's happening in their school. So they know what it is, they know what it means. And, if they feel like they have no answers, they may entertain it. And so it's important to consider that, again, like you said, Britt, no one is immune. No one is outside of the possibility of considering that thought. And we have to make that very clear.
Agreed. Also, like you said, there are no religion used to be thought of as a buffer. I grew up hearing all the time, well, you definitely don't want to commit suicide, because if you get suicide, you're going to go to hell. And that was kind of the cover-all that I think a lot of Black people who tend to be more religious kind of felt. However, if you feel like I'm in hell here in my life, and then what's the difference? So religion is not a buffer, race is not a buffer. It is something that impacts everybody, and it would behoove you to definitely address head on with your families, with your coworkers. If you're not talking about it, you definitely need to be.
There are certain things that are going on right now in the world that trigger a sense of hopelessness and helplessness. I mean, people are losing jobs, people are losing loved ones. There are so many life transitions that are happening really quickly, and they feel like they're beyond our control, because it's little that we can do about them other than contend with it and try to transition along with it. But sometimes those life transitions, those really tough things, prompt such an overwhelming feeling of hopelessness and helplessness, and just being overwhelmed and feeling like you're tapped out of options, that you resort to feeling like what I can control is no longer dealing with it. And unfortunately, sometimes suicide is one of those options that people consider. So I think we want to go over a quick list of some of the warning signs, just so that if you or a loved one feels any of this, or they express to you that they're feeling any of this, now we are able to now have that conversation. Talking openly about these feelings is your invitation to go ahead and talking about it, because it is a myth that if you talk about it, you're planting seeds. That is not the case. If I verbalize it, that is your invitation to talk about it directly to me, transparently, and have that conversation. We almost 100% guarantee that having the conversation is not the first time that they thought about it, if that's something that they've been struggling with. But it may be their first time having somebody to listen to and asking for help in whatever way they know how to. So let's talk about a few of those warning signs.
Yeah. And we, one of the things that we definitely wanted to do is we're not trying to throw a bunch of facts or we're not trying to overwhelm you. What we really want to do is make this a conversation that you can have with your children, that you can have with your spouse, that you can have with your friends and your coworkers. And there are a ton of warning signs. So we're going to make sure that we add them to this video. But I wanted to start with warning signs in children, because one of the things that research shows is that parents can be very confused by warning signs in children simply because of the changes that children go through. They go through a lot of rapid changes in size, in height, with voice changes. We have puberty, emotional, there's just so many different stages that children go through rapidly that can cause and affect their emotions. And so it looks like, oh, they're just having a tantrum. Oh, she's just sad, today because her friends didn't want to talk, but they'll talk tomorrow. Be very careful about monitoring those things with children and not putting them on the back burner as them being childish. Children do have emotional fluctuations. However, they should not be consistent. One of the things that parents who have lost children say is that, it was pretty consistent and I thought she was going, through a stage. I thought she was going through, a season. I thought he was just going through a little something. He started not liking to do the things that he always did. That's another thing. Children are changing constantly. And so if they no longer want to play with dolls, that's cool. If they no longer want to watch the show that they generally watch, we feel like, okay, that's cool. They're just changing. They have different likes. However, that might mean something. And it's the very little things in children. They are not capable of expressing things the way that adults can. So you have to pay attention to the little things. And like Brittany said, one of the warning signs for children is, them even asking about death, them making mentions of, mommy, would you be okay if I wasn't here? I wish I wasn't here. Them saying things like that. To say, don't say that, is not enough. What you mean you wish you weren't here? You know how hard it is for me to keep you here? That's not how that can be addressed if you want your child to be supportive. If you want them to feel like it is okay to bring up whatever is in their mind, that is not the way that we can address it. And one of the things that we definitely can't do is ignore it because of that myth of if you address it or if you bring it up, it's gonna plant the seed in their mind. Again, it is a myth, it is false. We are here to debunk that rumor. It's not true. If they bring it up, this is your chance to address it and to address it directly.
Absolutely.
I think another thing that particularly we as clinicians can sometimes even get caught up on is that people who deal with chronic mental illness and chronic mental health issues is that with certain conditions, it's kind of a recurring thing.
Right.
And so this just may be another symptom. This is something that is typical of this behavior. And so we don't always take it as seriously, or if someone in your life that is known to have mental health issues, known to have struggles, and she's just doing what she does every Thursday or every time she goes through this. But it only takes one time, one really bad episode to kind of push somebody over the edge. And so I think that it's serious enough that every time it happens, it's still important to make sure that that person receives the support that they need. Because
Absolutely.
like I said, it only takes one time, or even if someone makes multiple attempts, and if the intent is to not actually end their life, they can injure themselves so deeply that it actually causes loss of life, even if that wasn't the intent. So any type of suicidal behavior or reckless behavior is something that is warranted in helping that person, making sure that they get the support and that they get the mental health assistance that they need.
Yeah, and Corley, that actually reminds me, I know, Brittany, you also mentioned how this suicidal ideations really does not have any type of specific group or person that it targets. It goes from celebrities to our homeless brothers and sisters. And so I remember listening to an interview of Robin Williams, I can't remember exactly who the woman was, but she was close to him. And, you know, he suffered from depression for years. And she had a conversation with him very, very shortly before he passed. And she said, I thought that this was one of his depressed moods again. I thought that this was one of those times that we had gone through and gotten through year after year. And that time ended up being the time that he took his life. And so even though people can deal with something and it can be consistent, you never know which time is for them going to be the last straw. You never know which time is going to wear them very thin. So you want to address and tend to every time. I know that can even be, let's be honest, it can be a little draining for loved ones and it can be draining for friends, but you find somebody to get strength from, you find resources to get strength from so that you can pour into that person who needs it.
Yeah, we just want to encourage you to acknowledge every gesture, every thought, everything that is mentioned. So it's, for a child, it could be simple as a drawing that's dark colors or something like that, or not wanting to eat, a change in sleep pattern. It could be just a fixation with dark shows or dark music. For an adult, it could be, again, a fixation. It could be hopeless moods, and it could be depressed symptoms. It could also be reckless behavior. So just being really, really careless with your life and your decisions. I mean, any change, we just want you to just be mindful. Let it turn those antennas up just a little bit and just be in tune. And if someone is brave enough, because it does take a lot of bravery to be honest about having a thought about ending your life. If someone is brave enough to have the conversation with you, we now want to equip you with what to do, because that can be scary. So all of a sudden someone says to you, I'm having a thought of ending my life. That can be overwhelming if you were not expecting it. And if you also are not maybe a clinician and you don't really know what it takes, there you have a very vital role, and we want to empower you now to know what to do. So I think my number one thing to do would just be to listen first and then ask open-ended questions. So you want to create and cultivate an environment where that person feels very safe to share their truth. So that means just quietly listening to everything that they have to say. And then once they seem like they're done, okay, tell me more. Oh, wow, thank you for sharing that. You know, like you inviting them to just pour it all out so that you know exactly what they're feeling at that time. That would be, I think, the first thing that we want you to do is just listen and then learn as much as you can about what they're going through at that time.
Absolutely. And for me, the number one thing not to do is to take that time as an opportunity to share all of your grievances, how hard your life is, why the things you're going through could give you suicidal thoughts too, but that person don't see you trying to kill yourself. This is not your stage. If somebody is brave enough to share this information, it's not the time for you to talk about everything that you have going on. It is also not the time to negate what they're saying. Girl, you fine. Let's just go out tonight. Nah, dog, it's all right. You want to go play basketball? No, ma'am. No, sir. It is time to directly address what has been shared. Listen and respond. That's what I would say.
I would say my number one is similar to you guys. Just be a supportive center for that person. If they want someone to call a number with them, go to a facility with them, be that support. But that can be draining on you, so also take that time to get the support that you need as well in order to be a support for someone else, because it is hard being that person for sure. But be supportive, be there. And at the end of the day, like, there's only so much you can do, because this is what we'll get into, I'm sure, a little bit later. It's a very personal personal choice that someone is making. So it's not like you're not going to be able to really do everything. The only thing you can do is be a support. So if that person does want to reach out, that person does need a support system, that you are a part of that. But don't take on the ownership of being the person that is in charge of saving this person's life, because that's a very hard cross to bear.
Yeah. What we would want you to do is listen. We want you to ask open-ended questions. We want you to keep it about them. Don't make it about you. We want you to be supportive. And we also want you to reach out for some additional support, because this is not like a one-man band. And we are not expecting you to save that life. We're just helping. We are asking that you are part of that healing and that growth that they are desperately seeking and needing. So if someone were to tell you that they were having thoughts of suicide, the first thing that we want to do again is listen. We also want you to reach out to some professionals that are trained to manage a matter of this magnitude. We want you to stay with them as long as you can, or just keep them around somebody, because like we mentioned earlier, it can feel very isolating. So we want to make sure that they have some physical company if needed. And then if there are objects around that could be lethal, we want you to do what you can to safely remove them or kind of keep them somewhere away from that person. So these are like small things that you can do to make sure that you are doing what you can to keep a person safe. Again, we don't want to put this all on you, but we want to show you how, I guess, your link in the fence will kind of help with that protection of that person. So that's something. These are a few things that you can do in the moment.
Yeah, and specifically, children are really near and dear to my heart, so that's why I focus on them so much. But specifically, the same way that we want you to use these tips if you're speaking to an adult is the same way we want you to use these tips if you're speaking to a child. If they mention something like this, you have to be direct. To avoid it does not make it disappear. If they mention something like this, you want to know, what's making you think about this? Do you have a plan? If they tell you a vague plan or something they heard about, you also want to remove the access they may have to those materials as well. Children are just as capable as adults of taking their life.
Yeah.
I just want to make that really, really, really clear. We look at them very innocently, but at the end of the day, all of these stressors that adults are dealing with, children now have the same access to. The stressors that their parents are dealing with is going on to them, unfortunately, when they're in the household. So use these same tips with children.
Absolutely. So what about when it's a little bit too late and someone has already attempted, or unfortunately, if their attempt resulted in a completion? Because not all attempts result in a completion. Some of them are unsuccessful in the regard that they did not finish, I guess, what they initially thought that they wanted to start. So what now? And I think that's where we want to make sure we kind of wrap up with helping you to determine what next, what now? Because like Corlisha said, this is not on you to save that life. So if someone decides that they want to end their life, that is a decision that they have made. But we want to equip you with how to respond and how to support if they've attempted, or how to help to gather the pieces to life that remains if they have completed. So do we have anything we want to share about that, guys?
I think one of my recommendations would be, for the family to stay connected. With any loss, I think sometimes it can wear on the connections and the relationships. People sometimes take ownership for what happened. People take responsibility for something that may have occurred between them and the person who unfortunately took their life. And it's important as a family or a group of friends or what have you, whatever unit it is that we're talking about, for you guys to stay connected. You'll need each other, because suicide is one of those things that wears on so many people. Yes, it happened to that one person, but then there are just branches and branches of emotions that go out. So staying connected to your loved ones, to your supports, very important. Very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agreed. I would say I think that it's so easy for the loved ones after someone has passed to kind of go back into their mind and think of points that they could have made a difference if I had answered that one phone call, if I didn't have to go to work at 3 and we could have met up at 4, or if I had went to his party, that I would have seen him one last time, or I could have spoken to him. Just kind of go back into your brain and relive all the moments that you could have said, you would have said, whatever the case may be, but you really can't do that to yourself. That's not really fair, because like we said, that person made a decision, and so you can't put that on yourself. So just make sure that when these things happen, that you also go and seek assistance, that you go and you get help, that you reach out to someone, because like that is something that can really weigh on a person, and that is something that you will take through that guilt with you throughout the rest of your life. So make sure that you also get the help that you need. It kind of makes us more aware and more keen to be more vigilant with the other people around us, because I think what we also said earlier, to where if it happens in a child's school, these things just start to kind of rapidly happen. Happen with celebrities, it kind of seems to happen in 3s and 4s. So when this happens, this is a time to really readjust and really be really vigilant about the things that are happening around us, and that we do heed the signs.
I think that to piggyback on both of your excellent points, so staying connected and not blaming oneself. And I think that I would encourage people to educate themselves from where you are now. So you cannot go back, unfortunately. And as much as we would desperately want to go back, we can't do that. But what we want to do going forward is operate now from a place of awareness and education. So that is educating yourself, that's educating your loved ones, that's seeking professional help if needed, but educating yourself on now what to do, what does it look like, and how can I support this ongoing movement. It's not like a singular thing. It just doesn't happen once and it goes away. Unfortunately, because of the prevalence and because of the world that we're in, it happens and it continues to happen, unfortunately. So going forward, we want to just make sure that we are educating ourselves on what to do differently, what we can do going forward, and how we can support those who may be having these thoughts and feelings going forward, including ourselves if they ever were to come up. So knowledge is empowering, and knowledge helps to save lives. And so while you're staying connected to those that you love, and while you are staying in the moment, and being present and healing and grieving, you're also educating yourself so that in the future you just feel more equipped to handle life, however it looks, at whatever phase it brings you to, that you are now just empowered and you have more knowledge.
Agreed. And one last thing I think is important to share: if someone has taken their life and was successful, and I know we also are wanting to share these same points for family members after the fact, we want to be sure that you guys know you're staying connected, you're being informed, you're not taking too much ownership of somebody else's decision, but you are also, if you loved and cared for that person, you are also remembering them for who they were and not what they did. I think that grief tends to hold on when we think about the way somebody left, or when we think about how certain things happen. But just taking time to celebrate that person on birthdays, talk about happy memories with them on holidays, do things like balloon releases and pictures and things of that nature really help you to continue to heal in a healthy way, as opposed to holding on to grief that might be a little heavier when you're thinking about the way in which they left. So that's another thing I kind of wanted to drop before we head out.
Janelle, really, and I'm so grateful that you said that. We want to remember that life is a sum of every experience that we've ever had, people. So life is a sum, like it is. Every little moment adds up to what life means. It is not just the end result. And so we want to make sure that we are embracing every part of life. So remembering that life continues as long as you're still here, as long as you're still in the game, as long as you are still active. You have more, like your sum is just growing, like your sum is getting bigger. So there's often a lot more to live for. And if somebody has made a decision that brings them to the end of the physical life, remember that they are not just their sum, that they are everything that went into that end result. So just let's hold on to every phase of life. Let's hold on to every memory and everything that resulted in that end. So it may look different now, but life is the sum of things, and it is not one isolated situation. That's what we want to implore all of those to remember. Those who are struggling now, those who have lost someone, life is all of it. It is the journey, and we encourage you to keep going and keep living.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We hope that you guys feel informed. We hope that you feel empowered. We hope that you are in a place where if this were to happen, because life happens, you feel prepared to have conversations, to take actions, and to help somebody remain safe and remain here. And if they are in a place where they need further assistance, we hope that you're ready to help them get the resources that they need as well. If you guys have any questions, we definitely will be dropping some information that can be helpful. But if you have any questions, if you know somebody who's struggling with suicidal thoughts, if you yourself are struggling with suicidal thoughts, we are here to support you in any way that we can possibly do that. And we just appreciate your attention to this matter, which is extremely, extremely prevalent and important. And we look forward to having more conversations like this with all of you. Thank you guys for tuning in. And for now, we gotta say bye. Until next time.
Until next time. Take care of yourselves.